Firstly, Blake, day 2 is very special to us. I'll tell you more about it. So it does feel like day 5, doesn't it? Right. So thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. To your viewers, my name is Sirish Raghuram. I'm co-founder and CEO at Platform9. Platform9 was founded by 4 former VMware engineers to make it easier to run private, hybrid, and edge clouds. We do that by delivering Kubernetes as a service. But something unique about us is we're the only company that has this innovation of a cloud control plane. So cloud control plane is really what Amazon has within its cloud, Azure has within its cloud, Google has within its cloud, that underpins all of the different service endpoints that these clouds have. So it makes it easy for them to launch new services, for you to consume those services and get a delightful user experience. So you can kind of just go launch applications on top of it. So we've taken that idea and we've basically opened it up using open source software like Kubernetes. So we have a cloud control plane that we pair with open source technologies like Kubernetes, like OpenStack. There'll be more to come. And the idea is that you can now get that public cloud-like experience, but with that control plane, you can get that on your private clouds, you can get that in your data center, you can get that in the edge, you can get that in a hybrid architecture, you can get that in the public cloud. So that's a little bit about us and what we do. We're delighted to be back at KubeCon. It's been 2 years. We had a great time in San Diego, and it's been great to see the show back this year. And we do have a big announcement coming up on a product side in the edge space, but it's about 2 weeks away. We whipped our engineers harder and harder, but we forgot to whip the trademark lawyers, and they needed a little more time. So it's going to take 2 more weeks, but something exciting coming up in the edge space.
Oh, very cool. And then in the Kubernetes as a service, so you've got multi-cloud, you've got on-premise, and then you have edge computing. That's pretty interesting. So for the companies looking to get into the space today and saying like, hey, if I go with Platform9, what are some of those things like that they can readily get value from?
Yeah, let me give some examples of, so your viewers can understand how our users use us. We're being used by Juniper networks. Almost every single developer within Juniper is using Platform9's technology as part of their private cloud. Some 3,000 nodes now running in a private cloud with our control plane, cloud control plane. We have retailers like Redfin and online commerce services like SaaS services like Redfin that are using us to run their applications on Platform9. They use us on a combination of Amazon and possibly others, but initially on Amazon. We have retailers, a very large coffee chain, a major European retailer that are using us for hybrid and edge cloud infrastructure in their stores. So actual storefront, stores being supported by an edge cloudlet in the store. In the 5G space, we have like major carriers who are starting to deploy our technology to support like the 5G core and the 5G radio sites. And we have a partnership here with Mavenir, who's a major supplier in that space. So essentially, these are all companies that are using cloud in a really big way. They want their lens into cloud to be Kubernetes, but they want the Kubernetes experience to be fully managed. They want the SLA, they want the operational uptime. They want to know that there is a team and automation and expertise behind it to stand behind them if they have problems. And that's what they get from Platform9. So their developers, ultimately, we serve platform engineering teams. That's our customer. And the platform engineering teams typically serve the end customers who are the developers. But they're all basically, we're now servicing tens of thousands of developers through the product.
Nice. And I know I just read about an AI company that saw huge benefits from you, started with the N.
Norna.ai.
Yeah. What are
it's
some
a very special story actually,
okay,
because it's a small company,
okay.
And it's near and dear to my heart because as an entrepreneur myself, I know how hard it is to build a company, and I think they have a really good story. So Norna.ai is a small company. It's a young, promising startup, exciting startup in the applied AI space. So they apply AI to improve the online retail experiences. And what they found is that running their AI technology in the public cloud was cost prohibitive because of the cost of like GPU resources in Amazon. And also there's availability problems around these resources now. There's a lot of demand for them, so you can have some contention around it. So for those reasons, they decided to kind of say, hey, we need to go run this in a colo where we can basically control the hardware that it's running on. Otherwise, economically, it was not working out for them to be running on the public cloud. It's a small company, it's like 5 people, and the CEO and the CTO are engineering founders who are kind of working 100-hour weeks. And they said, look, if it weren't for Platform9, we would have spent our time just running Kubernetes, whereas we needed every available cycle to be going into building our differentiating core competency, which is this applied AI for the retail industry. And they said that, look, essentially without something like Platform9, we wouldn't exist as a business today. And so that's like, I think to me, very gratifying as an entrepreneur to see that our technology, all the hard work that our engineers, invest is actually making a difference in, and from a different startup's point of view, they said, look, we wouldn't be viable without your technology.
Yeah, I mean that's great. If it within the workflow, as a lot of developers say, if the tool can help me out, that's what I want. I don't care about all the shiny stuff because if I can use it in the workflow, then it's kind of like, what's the point? But it's a really amazing story.
Yeah, it's very special.
And then sort of looking at KubeCon itself, just so we can, we're back in person. It's hybrid. Is this your first KubeCon? Have you been to some other? Or you said San Diego.
We've been to every KubeCon. Okay. Look, we started working on Kubernetes when the announcement, shortly after the announcement of Kubernetes first came out from Google, right?
Wow.
We were actually on an offsite, on a way back from an offsite to the office when the announcement came out, and we'd been looking at LXC and Docker already. Our first product was OpenStack as a service with our control plane, but we were already looking at LXC and Docker. And our philosophy is to essentially work with the open source standard in the space, right? So for VMs, we used OpenStack because it was the open source IaaS standard around VMs. Now with containers, we chose Kubernetes because we believed versus Docker Swarm or something like a Mesos, we believe that Kubernetes would become the open ecosystem standard. And 5 years later, we've been proven right. So we've been at every KubeCon essentially for the last 5 years. This KubeCon is very different, right? It's very interesting. There's a lot fewer people, understandably, given what's happening in the world today. But it feels like the quality of the conversation is definitely progressed. And to me, comparing San Diego to today, it feels like it has jumped significantly forward. A lot more people using Kubernetes, a lot more of them using them in the public cloud, but also people having real scale and real operational problems as well. So it feels like the adoption's definitely grown, and qualitatively, these customers are more mature than where I think the community was 2 years ago.
Nice. So you can definitely tell the progression there. And looking back on all the KubeCons you've been at, is there like any favorite moment or some sort of memory?
I think 2019 was great for us because it felt like there was it felt like the biggest KubeCon, probably must have been the biggest KubeCon ever, because shortly after that COVID happened and everything kind of got harder. There was a lot of energy at the show, and it just felt like there's a lot of energy in San Diego. The hybrid events, look, I think they're super inclusive and they're super friendly, especially, and they're more affordable and they're easier to go to. And given the Delta variant and the state of public concern around COVID, I think it is entirely understandable that the in-person attendance is a lot smaller today than it was. But I think it just lacks. You don't see as many people today as you would have seen 2 years ago, right? So I think the 2019 KubeCon was remarkable. But I'll tell you that this KubeCon is also very special because we've had so many. We looked at last year. We looked at last fall. We looked at Europe, and we decided to take a tiptoe into the water, back into the water with this show. And I'm glad we did, because I think the arrangements they've done are really good. And I think it's just great to reconnect with people, meet so many people, customers, users, partners in the flesh that we've not met for 2 years now.
Yeah, it's amazing. You just don't get those hallway conversations and Zoom meetings and stuff like that, for sure.
You don't get the serendipity, right?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
What you don't get. You get the boring.
Yeah,
you don't get the unexpected, right?
Yeah. And you talk about customers, partners, that sort of thing. What are some of the trends that you're seeing this year as we start to get into Q4?
We're seeing a lot of growth in the edge. One of our partners here at the show is Cox Edge. They launched an edge service based on our Kubernetes platform. I think that the edge, I mentioned there's a product announcement coming out in a couple of weeks. Just last week, in the last week, we've seen announcements from VMware and Google and IBM Red Hat. So I think edge is definitely, and it's a little bit hypey in that people think edge and they think about a lot of things, but in reality, there are specific things where latency sensitive applications, 5G itself as a workload. I'm not even talking about 5G enabled apps. I'm talking about 5G itself as a workload that essentially needs to be run on a distributed compute architecture, the CDN edge, and people wanting to collocate some application intelligence alongside the CDN edge. I think the retail edge, these are all real, right? Like we are in active conversations with customers running in production in each one of these use cases today. So this is real. And I think edge it's very early days yet. So I think that is a remarkable change for me because I feel like even 2 years ago, there was really not that much real edge production usage.
Right, nice. And then if you sort of you looked into the crystal ball for next year, is there one trend you're super excited about? And is there one trend that you think is maybe too under the radar that's not getting talked about enough?
So, I'll give you one trend that we're doing a lot of work in the space, and we expect to have announcements coming up. Is actually managing larger scale cluster environments where people have using Kubernetes at larger scale with larger technical audiences, larger groups of technical audiences, and they want the ability to stamp out clusters and manage clusters as cattle as opposed to pets. The irony here is that Kubernetes lets you treat application components and infrastructure components as cattle, but the Kubernetes cluster itself is generally still being dealt. Generally, it's pretty hard to replicate. It's pretty hard to rebuild. A production cluster, is not trivial, right? And I think that we're working on a roadmap to make that, really the ability to stamp out clusters against profiles, to be able to compare two clusters and say how do they differ. The ability to compare a cluster versus a declared published Git, artifact in Git and say, how is the real world instantiation of this cluster different from the spec that was published into the source tree? I think that is, very, very powerful, especially for those who are using Kubernetes at a large scale. I think one thing that I feel like I don't hear enough talk about is the knob problem around Kubernetes, right? Like I think Kubernetes has a zillion knobs, and it just feels like Knative had more momentum maybe 2 years ago than it does today. We think that it's an interesting technology. We think that Kubernetes, there's like 40 to 60%, somewhere between 40 to 60% of the developer audience out there wants to be able to use some of Kubernetes functionality like auto-scaling and self-healing and elasticity, but they don't want the low-level knobs that Kubernetes gives you. They want something simpler. And it felt like, we obviously were the company that built Fission.io, the functions as a service framework, to make it simpler to build applications on top of something like a Kubernetes infrastructure. We feel like there's a lot of potential in this space. There's a lot of need in this space. I just don't seem to hear enough about it. It felt like I was hearing more about it 2 years ago with the likes of Knative. So that feels like a bit of a missed opportunity, if I could say so, or an underserved need. Again, one that we're looking at.
Well, hopefully now anyone listening to this, you got some work to do. Sirish is giving you some homework. So hopefully some of that can get addressed.
Yeah, if you're doing so, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
you know how to find me. Just look me up on LinkedIn and drop me a note.
All right. And last question. We get a lot of young professionals just looking to get into a career into the space, whether it's around cloud native, cloud computing. Do you have like one or two sort of tips as far as career advice that you would like to give them?
I think one of the advantages of the space is that there is a high quality curriculum, right? Like if you can just do your CKA or CKAD, I think it covers a certain amount of baseline information and basics that will serve you really well. And folks, nationally, where the unemployment, like it's hard for restaurants to hire, staff. I think in this industry, with someone with that kind of talent, Kubernetes talent, is essentially unhireable. It's like you can't find enough of these people today. So I think it's a great career choice, and one where we're still in the early innings. We're still, if you were to ask me what percentage of workloads are running on cloud native today, of all the enterprise workloads out there, I don't think that stat gets talked about as openly as it should. I would reckon less than 10, 15%. And that tells you that there's a long, long road ahead, and there's a lot of opportunity ahead. And that would be my recommendations. Just do your CKA, CKD.
Ah, nice. All right. Well, Suresh, it was so great to have you on today with DZone. We got to hear from Suresh at Platform9. We do got the big teaser about some edge computing announcements to look forward to in about 2 weeks. We'll be on the lookout for that so we can let the audience know about it. But it's really great as a veteran of KubeCon to talk to you, and you've got so many offerings to make developers' lives easier with Platform9. We hope everyone goes out and checks out their website.
Thank you for having me.